Linux is at its heart a text-based operating system. PowerShell, even though it's a CLI like Linux, it's not a text-based operating system. Linux includes all kinds of tools for manipulating text and things like that. PowerShell does not, because it doesn't work with text. Even though it displays things in text, it doesn't work with text. It works with objects. So let me show you how this works a little bit. I'm going to do a get service just to view running services. Now, this shows up as text. However, this is actually a list of different objects. So I'm going to do another one here just to kind of look at one of these. I'm going to look at the bit service. And so this is an object that represents that bits service. Now, with that object is going to could include methods and events and properties. Properties describe the object, methods are things we can have the object do, and then events are things that get triggered when something happens to the object. Now, when I do this, it shows me right here, you can see status, name, display name. So these are three different properties, and then names of the properties. And then this is the that particular object, those properties for that particular object. Up here, you can see we have a whole bunch of objects, right? Each line represents a different object. And we have those same three properties, the status, the name, and the display name. And if I scroll up here far enough, you're going to see, there we go, status, name, display name. Okay, there's actually more properties to this than we see here. This only shows us three. We're going to talk about that later because that has to do with some of PowerShell's internal formatting. But if I want to look at the other properties or events or methods related to the object, PowerShell gives me another discovery tool. So earlier on we talked about three discovery tools we have in PowerShell. The first one is get command, which helps us get information about commands, so discover commands. Get help can get us information about those commands and how to use them. The other one is get member. So those first two help us discover commands and how to use them. This third one, get member, helps us discover objects. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to do get service bits. It doesn't matter if I do one or the whole thing. I'm just going to do one of them here. And I'm going to pipe that to get member. Now, by the way, if I would have just done get service, cut out the bits and do get member, this would give me the exact same thing. What it does is it shows me all of the methods and properties related to that particular object. Now, at the moment, we're going to bypass methods. We don't care at the moment. And we're going to look at properties. We'll come back to methods later on. So here are the properties that we have. So can pause and continue, can shut down, can stop, container, dependent services. And notice we're going to have properties, and then up here we're going to have alias properties. Now, at this point in our life, it won't always be this way, but at this point in our life, a property is a property. It doesn't matter if it's just property, if it's alias property, if it's script property, whatever. A property is a property. So this is how we can discover more about those objects. Now, in a couple of subsequent videos, we're going to talk about some different things we can do with these properties. But I do want to clue you into one other thing in this video, and that is we talked about PowerShell being object-based. So we've got all of these objects that we're working with, and every time we get something, we're dealing with objects. In fact, if we create something, we're always dealing with objects. And it's going to be an object all the way through the command line, no matter how many commands it goes through, we're always dealing with objects. Everything will always be an object. So PowerShell gives us some commands to manipulate objects. And they are generic commands. So I'm going to do get command, and we're going to use the dash noun. And I want to look at anything that's a generic object command. Now, we're going to look at some of these a little bit later on in some subsequent videos, but I want to let you know that they're there now. So we have compare object. Well, we can get help on these, but that's pretty straightforward, right? We're going to compare objects. We can group objects. We can measure objects. That lets us do statistical analysis like count, sum, min, max, average, things like that. Select object we're going to talk about in probably our next video. Sort object is another one we're going to talk about briefly. This is kind of weird because it sounds like it's selecting the objects. And in some cases that's true, but in general we use select object to select different properties of an object. Sort object, well, that lets us sort objects. Where objects is what lets us filter objects. So all of these generic object commands will work with any kind of object you have in PowerShell. So it doesn't matter if we're using processes or printers or physical drives or users or virtual machines. It's all an object. So we can use these object commandlets for anything. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover. We're dealing with objects all the time. We discover objects or explore more about objects using getMember. Remember, it's whatever it is this time. Let's do a get process to getMember. So whatever type of object we have, I'm going to go ahead and pipe that one to more because there's a lot. This will help us discover all of the properties, events, and methods related to any kind of object that we're working with. We use getMember to explore objects the same way we use getCommand and getHelp to explore commands. And then we use those generic object commandlets as ways of manipulating objects that we have in our pipeline in PowerShell.